Okay, so thank you, everyone. So we're just going to jump right into our next guest. And Valerie, you get the joy of introducing our bow tie guy.
Yes, he's fondly known as the bow tie guy. Dr. Frank, thank you so much for joining with us today. Dr. Douglas Frank is a world-renowned physicist with 60 peer-reviewed scientific publications. Somebody from Southwest Missouri, that's a little scary to me, but anyway. And he is included in cover and feature articles in the world's leading scientific journals. He left academics in 1996 and has done extensive consulting, inventing, and technical manufacturing, most recently in the bowling ball industry. He's recently featured on two of Mike Lindell's docu-movies, Scientific Proof and Absolute Interference, because he discovered the algorithms being employed to manipulate our elections. So, Dr. Frank, we welcome you to the Show Me State.
Good to be with you guys. I'm a big fan of Missouri. I've been there half a dozen times, including like 4 or 5 day long trips where I visit multiple counties a day. I love your Capitol building too. The art on the second floor is one of my favorite places.
Astounding, isn't it?
Yeah. It is really remarkable. Also, I endorsed some of your candidates during the election, and they won, which is rare for me. usually I'm and people always say, well, gee, Dr. Frank, will you endorse me? And I'm like, are you sure you want an endorsement? I don't have a very good record. But a couple of your candidates won, which is exciting to me. I know you guys are up against a lot. People like to think that because you're majority Republican that you must be conservative, but that's a mistake. That's not a logical flow of thought there. There are a lot of places in our country that are in big trouble, even though they're majority Republican. So you got work to do, but I think you're on the right track. Now, I've met with many of your clerks in your state to discuss election things, and Linda knows this because she's seen me doing it. And Linda, you asked a question earlier that I thought was really, really apropos. You asked the question, why are our clerks reluctant? And, you know, I've met with hundreds now across the country. Sometimes they're called election administrators. Sometimes they're called auditors, but I like your shorthand. We're just going to call them clerks. They're our election officials. And so I was thinking about that question while I was listening to a lot of the other discussion. And I've got a few answers, and it kind of varies state to state. But I've even met with some of the clerks in your state, and they're red-pilled. They know their elections are corrupt. There was this one county I was in where I met with the clerk, and she's highly suspicious of the machine. She and her deputy had turned off all the automatic features in her machines, and they kept manual records of multiple things. And she looked at me and she had this mean look in her face, and she says, I know they're doing it, Dr. Frank, but I can't figure out how. In other words, here's a clerk who knows the machines are being used to steal our elections. She's doing everything she can. She's not a cyber expert. Our people aren't cyber experts. These are, you know, administrator kind of people. They're you know, CPA types, bureaucrat types. And she says, I know they're doing it, but I just can't figure out how. And it's very frustrating to her. So she might be a place that might be willing to be a pilot test. But it's interesting because as soon as you start going down that road, they clam right up. So that's the second answer to the question. Why are they reluctant? They don't want to come under attack. The Clerks Association in our states are very powerful, and they are being paid, and they get all kinds of fringe benefits from the voting companies for cooperating and not making trouble. Then there's also the pressure from the legislature. You know, I was in many counties in, like, you know, Mike just mentioned in Arizona, how counties were saying, we're not going to certify, but all that pressure comes from the top down on them. And the reason that they succumb to that pressure, by the way, is not because of the top down pressure. It's because there's insufficient bottom up pressure. So that's why, you know, this whole emphasis on citizens is hugely important. And, you know, I've been reading Eric Metaxas a lot these days, and I'm reading this book right now, If You Can Keep It. And basically, that's our fundamental problem in our country, is that our citizens are not engaged. So in other words, the clerks, a lot of them want to do the right thing, but there's so much political pressure coming down on them, and insufficient pressure coming from the citizens. So that's why I spend so much of my time working almost daily with our local teams around the country. And I've been working with you guys as well. We need to educate the public. We need the public to engage. In fact, I'm already booked. February's almost completely full already, and they're into March already. So I'm going to be busy. I like the idea that Mike's coming to your state to emphasize that. So another reason, another answer why the clerks tempted. So one was that their fear of reprisal. Two, they're getting political pressure from top and insufficient pressure from the bottom. Another thing is a lot of clerks I've learned, they get bonuses. And I don't know if most people know this, but for example, when I was in Pennsylvania, they get bonuses based upon the number of people in their registration rolls. So in other words, after the election, if it all goes smoothly, they get a bonus. If they find problems, they don't get a bonus. And who pays that bonus, by the way? You see where I'm going with this? So in other words, the financial incentives and rewards for them not rocking the boat. And then, of course, they believe the lies. So I was just in Wisconsin recently, and every clerk I talked to, they all said the same thing. I met with many of them. The first words out of their mouth was, "Oh no, Dr. Frank, we can't get rid of the machines. It's required by HAVA. It's required by federal law." No, it's not required by federal law. That's the line they've been told by the people who have a vested interest in keeping the machines in the precincts. So when you push back and you push back and you push back and you show them the HAVA laws and you show them their own statutes, they realize, I guess it isn't required by law after all. But you know what, Dr. Frank? We want to put that machine in our county. Why do you want to put that machine? Guess what? If they put that machine in, they get a grant from the federal government for putting it in. If they put that machine in, they get money from the state for putting that machine in. It's like job security for them. They get paid to use the machine. So even though it's a lot of money, it's not costing the county the money. The state is paying a lot of it. Now, I'm not saying that the counties don't pay, because they do too. But my point is, one of the things you're going to run into when you come in and try to say, see, this is cheaper, it loses some of its leverage, because they're going to say, guess what? We're not paying it anyway. The state's paying for this. I was in South Carolina. Zuckerberg bought them $75 million worth of voting equipment 3 weeks before the 2020 election. Didn't cost them a dime to use that machines. And it's so much easier. And all this work we have to do now, it's all automatic. So anyway, that's kind of a long answer, but I was thinking about what are the answers that I hear from clerks about why they don't want to change. And I think probably the two most, if I were to reprioritize, I just kind of blurted those out. Probably the most reasons, I think they're afraid of reprisal, and we don't have enough citizen support. So that's what we need to work on, and that's why I so appreciate your grassroots works that you guys are doing. I'd like to tell another story. I was just in Wisconsin, and I was in Colorado. I was in this tiny county. They had 1,500 voters in this county. And I met with the clerk, and she said, and I showed her the fraud that was happening in her own county, and she was very disappointed about it, because, she thinks she's running a good election. And so she says, Dr. Frank, I've been doing this for 30 years. And 30 years ago, I ran the election just fine. Took me a few weeks to get prepared. I did everything on paper. I could monitor everything. And, we got the ballots counted by hand. We had everything documented. Everything was transparent. We could audit everything. She says, you know what, Dr. Frank, it was so simple back then. We were in and out. We had done the election, and it was done, and everything was transparent and auditable. She says, you know what? Guess how many people we have today, Dr. Frank? 30 years later, we still have 1,500 voters in our small county. But you know what? Now it takes me months and months to do the work, weeks and weeks afterwards. I don't understand all this technology, she says, and we're spending all this money and nobody trusts it, and everybody thinks I'm the bad guy. So why am I telling you that story? I think your small counties are your best chance. You've got small counties that they know it used to be simple. It can be simple again. We want it simple again. So I think that's a big lever that you have in Missouri. I think you ought to use that. I've met with your head clerk in your state, and he thinks he knows, and I have witnesses to this. He knows that your rolls are being used to manipulate your elections. So I would also encourage us as a group, as a community group, that it's not merely the machines that are tallying the ballots that the problem, it's also the machines that are maintaining the rolls and sending and printing the ballots and mailing them out to people, et cetera, et cetera. Really, we need to get back to single day elections, and we need to get back to hand counting and everything being transparent. So I don't know, maybe that was kind of a good start. How did I deal with the questions you wanted me to answer?
You did perfectly. So, and I don't know if Kristen has anything that's come up through the chat that we want to throw out there,
Yeah.
but I know that Eric has come up a couple times in that chat.
Oh yeah, Eric is a huge issue. By the way, the Secretary of State of Louisiana has eliminated Eric from the state of Louisiana and is recommending to all the other secretaries of states around the country to get rid of it. And he's the president of the National Secretaries of States Association. So in other words, Eric has now been exposed for the fraud that it is. I know that people at Cause of America have been working on their own Eric, comparing state to state and finding hundreds of thousands of people that are voting in multiple states. And Eric was supposed to be taking care of that. So in other words, what Eric is it's a system, if you don't know what Eric is, it's a system where your state pays a fee for the whole state and then by county. And what the state does is it gives all your voter rolls and all your DMV records to a central database, a company called Eric. It's not a government agency, it's a private agency, originally set up by Soros, et cetera. And it's purportedly to compare state to state. And then what they're supposed to do is Eric is then supposed to regularly recommend to the state how to clean up the rolls, because John Smith lives in Missouri, but he also lives in Louisiana, and he's voting in Louisiana now. So you should take him off your rolls in Missouri. That's what it's supposed to be. But I promise you it's not that. And I've got 45 states worth of information on my computer. And with very simple scripts, I've found hundreds and hundreds of people that ought to be removed from the rolls, and Eric isn't doing that. So what Eric has eventually ended up being just, our states are paying to give all their data to a central organization that's basically equipping the bad guys to steal our elections. So no, you need to get out of Eric. How about that for a kind of a nutshell about Eric?
Well, I do have one here that's a little bit more specific.
Yeah.
If we go to hand counting, how do we get information from the various voting locations to the main collection areas without using electronics?
How about a phone call?
Right. How do we do it before in 1977?
Phone call or runners. And my wife was a poll judge back then. By the way, I'm 61. I voted that way the first half of my life, and believe me, it works, and we all trusted it because there was chain of custody, there were signatures on everything. As soon as you put your ballots into a machine, who knows? And right now, by the way, I love your question, the question, Kristen. Let me address it in another way too. A lot of times I'll talk to clerks and I'll show them flaws in their election. And they give me this dog and pony show about how secure everything is at the polls. And then I'll say, and they go through that whole litany. And for the most part, what happens at the polls is pretty secure. And then I'll say, so what do you do at the end of the day? Oh, we close everything out. We account for the ballots that weren't used, blah, blah, blah. And then we report the numbers. And then I say, and then what do you do? And they say, oh, then we go home and watch the election on TV because we want to see what's going to go on. And I'll say, yeah, but you've reported the numbers. Do you have a way you can make sure that the number you turned in is the right number? I've spoken to hundreds of clerks. Not a single one has the ability to verify that the numbers that they turned in are the right numbers that are being reported. And there are reasons for this. One of them is because mail-in ballots are often not handled at the precinct. They're happened at a central collection, and they're convoluted. So they're reported in a way that the people running the precincts, they may do a perfect job in their precinct, but they have no internal way to verify their own numbers. And so whatever system we use, in other words, there's so many places in this that are just full of loopholes. Whatever system we use has to be internally auditable. And the people that care about the integrity of the election need to have the means to verify their own numbers. And they don't right now. So it's sort of, what needs to happen is I need to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm John Smith. I worked at the precinct 123. This is how many votes there were for John Smith. This is how many votes there were for, Mary Jones, and, give the report. It's all in tally. And then that can be put in an envelope, sealed up with all the ballots. And then that can be couriered by secure courier, chain of custody, maybe a sheriff, something like that, to be stored for longevity. But the point then is that then I should be able to, Doug Frank ought to be able to then go online and look at a website and say, yep, those numbers I reported, there they are, they're correct. And so if every precinct person could double check and make sure, that kind of closes the loop. And then every person in the world can look at that website and look, yep, that column of numbers adds up. And each one of those numbers has been verified by the person who ran the precinct. So in other words, they're internal audit procedures. Right now, there's so much of that that's automatic and so much of it that's convoluted. Nobody has any internal cross-checking. It's kind of like, when I was in college, I used to reconcile accounts during the summers to pay for school and whatnot. And we used accounting methods where we totaled everything up top to bottom, totaled everything up left to right, and the two numbers had to reconcile. And if they missed by a penny, we had to go back and find it. And all those double checks that's old hat. We all know how to do that stuff, but we're doing none of that in our elections. So I really think the bottom line is the reason why we're in the mode we're in is we've adopted systems that are completely inauditable by our own people. So there you go. How about that for a long answer? But I think I addressed the question.
You did.
Yeah,
you did.
And I do want to say that that tallying it down and tallying it across is all written into this process that we have in this e-manual.
I have little doubt that you've done that.
It's
I've
all
seen your
in there.
work, Linda. You're quite meticulous. And I would just like to apologize to you in public in front of everybody, because the deal I made with Ashcroft, I brought to you, and you and your team went out and canvassed, and you found over 500 examples of fraud in your state, and he did not deliver. And I felt like I'm the one that said, here's the project, and you delivered your end of the bargain, and your Secretary of State, Ashcroft, let you down. And I know that's true.
Well, I will say this. So in the second page of the e-manual, there's a thing about Missouri canvassers, which if people don't know me, that is where I sort of got involved first in the state.
Yeah.
And it says the path began here. If you hadn't done what you did, we wouldn't have been, because it was November of last year that we got the call, go out and find 100 phantoms, and everybody, all the volunteers, a lot of them on this call, all came together and worked right through the holidays to go out and knock on doors. That brought us to where we're at. And for me personally, going to Louisiana and seeing what they did, everything is where, let me go back further. My husband saying, yes, I'll leave my childhood home and we'll move to Missouri, which everybody's like, why did you move to Missouri? I don't know. The house was there. So it all happens for a purpose. So I'm very grateful to you. I do want to just say one thing so people understand with this process. The canned counting part of the process is specific to counting the ballots. So everything else in the election is going to look the same. In our state, poll pads connected to the internet are allowed, even with the new law. They're not considered voting equipment. So when you come in and I know, how would you know? Because it's an iPad or something. But when you come into the door for a voter, it's going to look very similar. You're going to walk in, you're going to sign in with the judge, no matter what system they use, and they're going to give you a ballot. One of the beautiful things about hand counting is that when a human being is going to look at your ballot, you don't have to spend time filling in that little oval so that a machine can read it. You get to put a check mark, put an X, circle the name. There's examples on the Secretary of State has a website of the state regulations with examples of how ballots were checked, and all those links are in the manual, the e-manual. But you could say, oh, that's not who I wanted to vote for. Cross it out, say not this one, and mark a different one and say this one. And it's accepted because that's voter intent. That's the beauty of letting human beings do the election.
A human being can tell intent better than a computer can. Here's a question for you. One of the, as you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but maybe your listeners, the main means of fraud that's taking place is ballots are being stuffed, not from who they say they're from. Okay, so the problem is that's usually through the mail, absentee ballots. And so, are you going to have in your new law and in the manual? Are you dealing with that? In other words, we need people comparing signatures, not machines, and we need people opening the envelopes, not machines. You see where I'm going with this? Because in other words, as part of it, have you only proposed the counting part? And maybe, and I'm not criticizing it. Maybe you have to do things one step at a time sometimes.
Yeah. So the e-manual focuses on the counting processes that are outlined in the statutes. We didn't try to go out and change any other part of it. Okay, I can't say for sure. I know in my small county that when those absentee ballots come in, that the clerk is looking at them or somebody in her office. I don't think our county has any kind of machine. I don't know about the big counties, how they compare them.
The big counties have machines that do it automatic. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a different battle for a different day, but still. Yeah. But still, it calls it down. So no, we're very grateful and love all the times. I think you've been here more than half a dozen times, actually. I think there was a point where you actually felt like you should take up residence in the state. So.
Well, I love you guys and I love the state, and I feel like we have a good toehold there, and it's I wish, I always tell people I wish it was like I was Jonah and I went to Nineveh and everybody repented in a day. This is a longer process, I can tell. And, I remember I took a leave of absence from the school I was teaching at. And I told the director of the school, I said, let me take a 1-year sabbatical so I can fix the elections across our country and then I'll come back. I think this is going to be the rest of my life is going to be devoted to this. And fortunately, people take care of my expenses when I travel around, so I can afford to continue doing it. By the way, one more thing I think I should say to add, it's important in this discussion. I think what you're doing with the hand counting is super important. But one of the, and I think the main reason it's important is because the machines, it's transparent and it's auditable, and I appreciate all that. But one of the things I've been going around the country saying is it doesn't matter how many times you count the cash in the cash register. What matters is how many of the bills are counterfeit. So I think that you've taken a good first step, and I'm 100% in support of this and excited, and I'll promote you all over the country. Because there are a lot of people ask me, gee, we want to switch to hand counting. How do we do it? Guess what?
Right.
Exactly. So I can help them. But I think it's just the first step, because just because you count it, you can count the cash in the register over and over again. What matters is how many of those bills are counterfeit. It's the same way with our elections. We can count the ballots, a zillion different ways. What matters is, are those ballots really from the person we think they're from? And that's important too. So each one of these steps, there are lots of loopholes in our current system.
Yeah, there is so much to do, and we're so grateful to you. So thank you. Thank you for joining us, and I'll follow up if we get any particular questions, but appreciate it. Thanks, Dr. Frank.
Love you much.
Thank you. Hey, Valerie.
Yes.
There she is. So we have some other special guests. We want to bring them right on. I'm going to let you just take the mic, please.
Okay, I would love to. I'm always a big talker. Thanks, Linda. We've still got our hand counting going on there in the background. We have Aaron Clements with us and attorney Professor Clements, as many of you know him, Professor David Clements. And Aaron has his lovely wife, has her bachelor's and master's degree in civil engineering with structure emphasis. She's a registered professional engineer, 18 years experience in infrastructure system analysis, design, construction, rehabilitation, and planning, and forensic evaluation throughout New Mexico. She has worked analyzing large sets of data and representing interactions of human behavior with infrastructure systems to identify problems and anomalies and establish historical patterns. And then Professor Clements gives a riveting overview, of the many cases filed after the 2020 election. And he has delved deep into those, reviewed the pleadings, the affidavits, and he shared those findings with many American citizens. Many in the mainstream media have written hit pieces about him, and he should wear that like a badge of honor. He was a New Mexico law professor until he refused to force his students to abdicate their liberty and wear a mask. He's still battling to keep his law license, and we are so excited to have these two freedom fighters with us today. And thank you so much for joining us. And what do you have to say for us about hand counting?
Wow. Well, thank you for having us. This is like a nice family reunion. Yeah, and the thing that came to mind when Mike Lindell was speaking was, if you're going to market this, it seems like this would be the great hand counting revival. And that's really what we need. Is we need a hand counting renaissance over the next 2 years, and to get anywhere and everywhere. And I think the difference between where I come at this from, probably more of your data analysts or people that, Sean Smith talks about the vulnerabilities of machines. Doc Frank talks about all of the different algorithms. I'm trying to equip people on more of a psychology experiment, if that makes sense, because you all are entering into a battlefield. And it dawned on me that when you're an honest person, it's bizarre when you're confronted with corruption and people don't want to get to the bottom of right and wrong. And I remember the first time I had a jury trial and the defense attorney was just lying through his teeth. I was just absolutely shocked. But you have to get over it pretty quickly. And I think that's what separated some of the advocates in the election space that are having some victories versus the other folks that, as soon as someone says, nope, you can't have a cast vote record, nope, we're not going to do what you say, that they just basically pack up and they say, well, they tried. And so what we're trying to do is cultivate a sense with our election advocates across the country that you just can't go home. And I think one of the instructive pieces of advice that I would give Missouri is you need to think about kind of a battle plan where you focus on all of the local stuff. Who is your local clerk? Who are the people in your community that are administering your elections? Who are the people that I can call and to show up and make the pitch? And then, excuse me, because if you don't focus on it locally, the problem can be overwhelming. And I think that's one of the things that we run into. Is this problem just is so huge, but you have to make it small. So some of the anticipated issues that you're going to run into would be, what's going to happen when you take your lovely e-manual to the clerk and you say, look, didn't you know you have a law in the books that allows you to hand count? What's going to happen? Typically what you're going to find is that the clerk, even though they were elected, will say, I've got to ask someone to see if I'm allowed to do this. So their default position is to ask permission from someone else. And invariably, there's going to be much pressure that comes on them to not change the status quo. And that pressure is going to come from several sources, but some of the sources that we saw in our audit work here in New Mexico was county attorneys. County attorneys are huge sources of people that will basically give clerks legal advice to not disturb the status quo. Other obstacles will be the machine providers themselves. You have to understand these are huge lobbying factions, and this is a contract that's very, very important that they keep. So they're going to apply all kinds of pressure to keep the machines in place. And so your ability to achieve success at a local level really is going to hinge on the clerk's ability to remember who they serve, whether it's going to be the people of Missouri, ES&S, Unison, or some of the attorneys that are basically just not wanting to work for a living. And so that's probably going to be the major obstacle. And then you have to take this to its logical end. And the logical end is probably not going to be the sunshine that you're looking for. The logical end in New Mexico was, for example, us taking an audit and a canvas from start to finish, to have 3 commissioners unanimously vote to get rid of Dominion, to get rid of drop boxes, to get rid of, to actually do hand counting procedures. And we secured those votes. And what happened? Immediately, the Secretary of State, through top-down tyranny, filed a lawsuit, and the Supreme Court of New Mexico says you've got to rubber stamp your elections. And they started referring them to for criminal prosecution. So we had some very, very brave commissioners, some not so brave. But when we took this all the way to the end of the road, so to speak, Couy Griffin, one of our courageous commissioners, was removed from office. So you need to know that this is such a threat to the status quo. And I share with you that story because that's what's ahead of you. I would be shocked and surprised if 100 clerks throughout Missouri were able to do this unencumbered. So I think this is one of those things where you have to really show your resolve and organize your little mini legions or platoons in your counties to prepare them. Have all of the answers readily available, which we're seeing in the e-manual. But don't lose sight of this. And Aaron and I just talked about this before we jumped on, is that the winning terrain where you will never lose an argument is based on public trust. No one trusts these machines. No one trusts the system. And what's beautiful about the hand counting roadmap that's being established by Linda and others is that you don't have to even agree with us about the machines. You don't even have to agree with us about algorithms. Wouldn't it be great if you could just make this headache go away and have a system in place where we can minimize it? So those are my opening thoughts. And then if Erin has anything she wants to add, we'll certainly answer questions.
I'd just like to thank you all for the encouragement of this meeting today. When we were all blindsided in November 2020 by what happened in our country, and we realized what a deep hole we were in, and you start to think about how far we have to come to dig ourselves out of it. And part of it is understanding how they stole it, understanding what the system is, understanding who the people are that run our elections, and then how to fix it. And I see that this team has come to the place where they understand all those things and they can explain it to anybody. And then you have the solution sitting there. We're watching people hand count ballots, which is where we want to be. And so you're giving these people, like, down to the details what they need to do to fix it. And so it's just an incredible amount of work that's represented here. And I'm just so thankful for your team and all the work you've done. It's been extremely encouraging.
Yeah, and then one thing that I'll add is that there is no statute of limitations on public trust. I've said this many times. And so someone has to do the dirty work to help educate us on how we used to do things. And what's great is that Linda is basically dusting off the old ways, and we're finding out the old ways are the best ways. It's like this forgotten knowledge. And the more that we can swim in that part of the pool and just start thinking through the processes, training people, equipping them, then we've got something to take to the clerks and to the boards of supervisors, that this isn't abstract. This is something that we can do. And so it's really, really encouraging that this is finally coming together. And the other thing that I'll say is it's, because I kind of mentioned some things that it might depress you, that Couy Griffin was removed from office. I see that as a victory. And the reason why I see that as a victory is that look no further than the most televised election in recent memory in Arizona, where you had boards of supervisors in Mojave County, in Cochise County, saying, I'm taking a duress vote. I'm afraid that I'm going to be arrested. I mean, do you realize how big of a victory it is that people now not only understand that there's massive fraud in our elections, but they're basically being held at a legal gunpoint to rubber stamp an election that they don't want to. And we're not going to lose those gains there. That's the beauty about of truth, is that we're not going to lose ground on the things that we've proven to be true thus far. And so this is the beginning of many more supervisors that are either going to say, look, I'm being held hostage, but I would like a different alternative. And what's beautiful about this is that we're now being educated on an alternative that hopefully we can get after in the next few weeks.
Thank you. So I have two questions that are sort of apart, but I'm going to throw them out at the same time. So, and David, especially with your legal background, at the very back of the e-manual, there's a resource on our Code of State Regulations. And so as much as I was into reading the statutes, and I kind of through a weird circumstance realized there is a Code of State Regulations where some more rules can be put in place, but there's a process for it. And I outline that, and I recommend to everybody to go in there and sign up for notifications on all the election rules. But I would think that you might, I think we have to be more alert to what kind of ways things could be changed on us when we're not watching. I mean, maybe a top down from the Secretary of State, but other things. So maybe things to keep an eye out for. And I know you're trying to be hopeful, but I think you both have been enduring so much persecution. You are great people to share that and tell us what we need to do to stand up to it. But the final question on that would also be, what does 2024 look like if we don't get some of these things changed now?
So the things that I would be on the lookout for is that, you have to keep in mind that Dominion, ES&S, Unison, these are corporations with lobbying arms. And they lobby just like any special interest group, which you need to know that basically they are the main drafters of your election code. Bar none. And if you ever wondered why it's so hard to have an auditable trail, it's because the people from Dominion and Unison are writing your code, so you can't audit anything. So why do I bring that up? Some of the things that we've seen is that there's a lot of bluffing that goes on. So you'll have the law dead to rights, and you'll take that law or that election code to the clerk, and you're right. And then next thing you know, an attorney general opinion shows up, not a statute, but an opinion, or an opinion from the EAC or some other federal authority, basically watering down all legal reasoning, and they will hang on opinions to not do the will of the people or follow black letter law. So, for instance, in New Mexico, we clearly established that none of the machines were certified under the law as written. So what did they do? They basically got opinions from the Secretary of State excusing her own conduct. The other thing that they'll do is race to have a change in the special session to basically, now that we've called them out on all kinds of legal deviations, they will request that those procedures, the lack of compliance with those procedures, that they can change the law. And so one of the things that we fleshed out was we've maintained that the clerks, the boards of supervisors, the county commissioners absolutely have the legal right to withhold certification in the midst of any erroneous returns, anything that's on the face of the returns that looks off, that they can withhold certification until they get to the bottom of it. Well, you'll notice the powers that be came back and basically said, no, this is ministerial. This is something that you just don't really have any discretion over. And then you ask them, well, can you point me to a statute that says that? And the answer is no, they can't. So you have to be prepared for a special session where someone's going to submit a bill that will, in fact, now say that this is a ministerial, non-discretionary act. So that tells us that we're right. So you're going to have similar arguments where you're going to have something that has the trappings of legality, whether it's an AG opinion or something coming from the Secretary of State, and it's probably going to be a ghost written letter from Dominion or Unison or ES&S on why we the people are wrong and why they're right. And in the meantime, they will, in feverish fashion, try to amend and change the election code to have new law. So that's the main thing that we're seeing. We're also seeing that in election drafts for bills. We saw one in Michigan where now they're determining who can do public records requests, because right now we've got all of these vexatious requesters that know exactly what they're asking for. So now they're statutorily trying to identify, people with official credentials, and they only can request public records. So that's another thing to look out for. As far as the terrain, looking forward to 2024, I kind of swallowed my pride and told people, yes, participate, and just know why you're casting your vote, because I've never maintained that we're casting votes. I told people a year ago that you're submitting a fractionalized, manipulated data point. I still maintain that, but as long as you're going into the election offices knowing why you're there, to uncover corruption, to spotlight things, and to fight for what's left of your voice, then I think that's perfectly honorable. But after the November 8th red wave propaganda letdown, I'm just not interested in doing that again, to overwhelm algorithms. I think all of our attention has to be dedicated towards initiatives like yours, where there are no machines and we get on it now. That's the other thing. We cannot wait till 2 weeks before an election to bring this to the attention of a clerk. They can't do anything about it at that point. So that's going to be kind of the messaging that comes out of the Clements camp is we need to get on it now and build on the momentum that we had thus far.
And lead with the lack of public confidence. Just show them poll after poll after poll that shows, the vast majority of people do not trust our elections, and especially that Arizona election. I think it was 70% of Democrats said that thing was not honest. And start there, because there is no answer to that except change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they even took exit polls of people that were part of the system. And the vast majority of people that worked the polls in Arizona said that they had no trust in what they just observed. So, what we're finding is that I think the sense is that we are dominating the court of public opinion. I mean, we've got the facts, we have the experts, and the other side basically has name calling. That's really all they've got is name calling, and it's pretty cool. The latest hit piece that was written about me, Reuters' own poll said that 2/3 of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. And I'm sitting there going, so they're writing a hit piece where the vast majority, 70% plus of the Republican Party agrees with me. And you scratch your head going, what world do you live in where you think this is going to get any traction with people in this space? So I think right now is the best time to get into this fight, because really the propaganda wings, the media people, there's such a lack of trust with these institutions that I think most of the people that have really taken kind of the cannon fire going in this, it's not even having a major effect. And so, like, even watching Mike say, this will be the next lawsuit that they bring against me for, how many billions of dollars. It doesn't look like that bothers him. And be honest, I wasn't really bothered by Reuters or the other stuff, because we, the people, have really stepped up. And the most beautiful thing about this movement is that we're finding local leaders that have basically become, people that we can rely on. And I think the Truth Summit was absolute proof of that, where we got to see 50 state leadership bubbles show up and affirm that, we're not crazy. And now it's like we can just talk about these issues in our sleep. So I think we've earned a great deal of power in this grassroots movement, and I think we've all pretty much integrated the system, how it works from start to beginning. And the other thing that I'm really, really encouraged about is that we are spotting problems with preternatural speed. I mean, the fact that there was stuff that might have taken us 6 months after 2020 to find out, that's not the case anymore. It's really cool to see people diagnose what's going wrong in Arizona within 24 hours. I mean,
and then to go to trial within a month. I mean, that was amazing.
Yeah.
They did a great job.
That was the fit to print issue that was identified by Dan Sundin. I mean, he literally found out and diagnosed the problem on one of the most obscure points of what is the likelihood of problems with machines malfunctioning if you put a ballot image on an incorrectly sized ballot. And next thing you know, a month later, the attorneys for Team Lake had experts that talked about that issue. They spoke about it confidently. The turnaround on that is just amazing. So, I mean, this is just, I think we're at a time where the weapons of the enemy are becoming more and more crude. It's resorting to just intimidation tactics, taking someone's phone, having a warrant issued here, but it's nothing substantive, which is really cool.
Yeah, we've seen the worst they have, and they have 3 ideas and they're out of ideas. And our side is so reasonable and intelligent and smart and offering, the solution. So there's really no comparison when you can get the, just view the landscape.
Yeah. And they really don't have experts. That's the other thing. Even their quote unquote experts, like Alex Halderman, is held under lock and key. And most of
he was on our side a year ago.
Well, from 2016 to 2020, everything that he put out there, we used, and he's basically become our witness, but they've put him under lock and key. And so when you read these articles, when you read Reuters, you're sitting there going, okay, so who's your expert? And you'll notice that they don't have any. We have all the experts, and that's a really cool place to be.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times when I hear an objection or somebody say, oh, well, it's just this, it's sort of like, and you're basing that on what? Exactly. Right? Because we know how the media is pushing that out. Well, you both, you have endured so much. I remember joining Missouri Audit Force back in the day, and you did all that work way back. I know even before I got involved with the Audit Force channels and your work with the J6. It's just a beautiful thing what you both have done and dedicated to this movement. And I was so grateful that you agreed to come on and talk with us. So we're just thrilled. Thank you.
It's our pleasure, Linda. Thank you. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so to kind of wrap up, it's been a great presentation.
It's been amazing.
Yes. And Valerie, when we talked about it, and Kristen, we said, it's just going to be really fluid. And I think it was more fluid than I ever imagined. It was just fantastic, the conversations. And our counting team over there, to our counting team, hello, you can wave and say hello. They've been counting the whole time. Yeah. They've done an amazing job in showing us, and they've just continued counting and doing their ballots and such. That's what an easy process it is. I really hope that, and maybe I think you've probably put it in the chat room a couple times, Kristen, but just drop that e-manual in there again. It's loaded on FrankSpeech, and I think if anybody will share it, that's where the information is going to be. That is going to help get everybody caught up into sort of a central sort of understanding. Does that sound right? Kind of a description of that? And then we really want, I didn't mean to talk about it earlier, so it's kind of covered our sort of messengers, legions, and liaisons, and we'll pursue that a little bit more. But we really felt like maybe there was a different approach that people would have. Maybe you're more of the messenger type. You're a keyboard warrior. You're a social media queen. I have a friend, I call her that, the social media queen. You can push this stuff out. And that's great because we do need to get it out. Valerie, as you kind of mentioned about, I think you said something to Mike about, we know our clerks, we know our people. And I coming from a state where we never met any of those people. And here they're like, oh yeah, we went to high school together. Oh, I knew her brother and I'm his sister. We dated for a while. It's like, oh my gosh, this is a great state, So people do know each other. So getting out there and talking to them is kind of an exciting thing. The legions, as we're calling it, because we didn't really like the term army, but it is the legion of like these volunteers over here who have been hand counting this whole time. We have, no matter what our marketing campaign, no matter what our approach, no matter how we go after this, our goal is to train up people on the hand counting process. You can speak to it better if you understand the process. So if you happen to know of a group, an organization, your church group, a political group, a community group, your neighbors, whatever. Besides doing videos, we are trying to set up teams around the state so that we can get people out to you. So we're going to give you some contact to let us know. And then the liaisons part, I think that before anybody runs out to a clerk, because it could, I think, really close a door if you take this book, even if you print it and put it on that clerk's desk and say, hey, we can go to hand counting, here's everything you need to know. That is not the best way, in my opinion, to transmit this to them. No different than I expected everybody on this call to have spent the last 12 hours or 24 hours whenever you saw the book to actually go through the e-manual and understand it. So I think that if you take time yourself and go through it, you understand the reasons, it gives you things to respond to objections. And some of them are my opinion of how I think you respond to it, but everything's linked to something. There must be 150 or more QR codes in that book to make it easy, whether you're on your screen, you can click them if you're on a digital, but otherwise you can, scan them. It'll take you to a statute. It'll take you to a news article. It's really intended to give you a foundational understanding. So when somebody says to you, no, it's too hard to get anybody to volunteer to be a judge, go to the article about Tripp County, South Dakota. There's actually 2 articles linked. So Tripp County had their commissioners make the decision, and they voted unanimously to switch to hand counting and get rid of machines, and it did not please their clerk very much. As a matter of fact, she sounded in the article where they interviewed her, I think she sounded a little bit put out by it. And she said, I don't know how I'll ever find enough people to do it. So I went back to see if there was a follow-up, like how the hand counting went. And I wished, because of course it was back in November, we didn't have the process completed. I could have sent her something and said, here's a process and all your forms, it'll be easier. But they did a follow-up before the election, and she said, and it was kind of a quote, it's in the e-manual. Well, actually, I was kind of surprised because lots of people volunteered to count. She goes, and she said, it turned out to be pretty easy. And I think that made a difference to her. So obviously, we need to be able to say we've got this legion of election judges, some who are willing to travel to nearby counties and serve, but that we provide a solution for that. So that's kind of where we're going. So how do we contact everyone? So Valerie, why don't you talk about We the People first?
Would love to. You can email us at wtpmo@protonmail.com. We are also on Facebook. We have a Facebook page that you can send a message to, We the People of Missouri. And we also are on Telegram, We the People of Missouri. And you can also just drop us a message there on Telegram as well. We also have a texting app that you could text us just the word Missouri, and that would enroll you in our texting app where we could contact you if you're interested in becoming, if you want to learn how to be trained in this, to be able to take 2 or 3 people with you to the clerk to show the clerk how this can be done. That phone number is 417-200-2349. And I'll do that again. It's 417-200-2349, and just text the word Missouri, and that would enroll you in We the People of Missouri's texting app. And of course, I'm sure we're all going to be sharing contact information with each other. So whichever one of us you contact, we want to be able to share that with each other as well, because we are all in this fight together.
We are. Hey, Byron, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I see you're there. Maybe if you want to either unmute or not, and tell us how we can follow Freedom Principle.
Yes, well, thank you. And you can follow the Freedom Principle Missouri on our website at freedomprinciplemmo.org. We're on Twitter at Freedom PPLEMO. We're also on Getter at Freedom Mo, and through social at Freedom Principle STL. And we are now on Frank Social at Freedom Principle Missouri. We're on Telegram also. So we're on just about every social media platform, Instagram and things. So look us up. You can also email us at freedomprincipleSTL@protonmail.com. And, we're a membership-based organization, so you can always, sign up for our newsletter, but also sign up as a member. Help us.
Great. Thank you. Okay. And I'm sorry, Kristen, your message is not coming back. Did you want to? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. As far as collaborating for this, I know Patriot Mama Bears will definitely be putting out content to keep people updated. So if you want to follow us, we don't have a website up yet, but if you want to follow us on Facebook, Telegram, Twitter, Truth Social, we are Patriot Mama Bears on all. So, and we don't have anything else set up just yet. So that'd be your best bet.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For Missouri Canvassers, really, and Cause of America Missouri, there is a channel on frankspeech.com, and we have put all of our videos going back quite a ways there. So you can go to frankspeech.com and just put in the search Cause of America Missouri. It'll show you the channels and some of the other information. And then any videos we put up from this event and for hand counting going forward will also be on Frank Speech. There was a email address in the flyer that went out that was cause.america.mo at PM, like petermary.me. But if I would say if you don't, I'm the one who has to answer all those emails, so it would be easier if you checked out on Frank Speech or did anything else there first. And then, but yes, please reach out if you have questions or you have something that you would like to do. So I would love to thank again our guest, Dr. Frank. And Dr. Frank, I don't know if you have any last words or any way that you want anybody to contact you. He's muted, so I don't know if he's there. And then David and Aaron, if you have anything that you want anybody to use to contact or follow up with you.
You can find me on Truth at Professor David Clements or on Telegram, The Professor's Record. And then I've got a website called theprofessorsrecord.com. And that's a pretty good place where we upload videos and long form interviews. And so probably the best place to find me.
Great. And Dr. Frank, Michelle, I don't know if you know Dr. Frank's contact info.
Yeah, he's on, I think that most people follow him on Telegram, which is it Follow the Data? And then
Follow the Data.
Mm-hmm. People can email him at drdouglasgfrank@outlook.com.
Okay. Doctor, right? Dr.
Correct. Yes.
Douglas
G. Frank. Yep.
At outlook.com.
Yep.
Wonderful. Well, thank you to our guest who came in. Thank you to all the organizers. Thank you to, there's people that you haven't seen hiding behind the cameras who have been helping. And then thank you to our accounting team over there. I see they're tallying. Are you tallying another batch? Okay, so I can't interrupt them. They're running another tally. So to all of our organizers, everyone who helped to get our speakers on, and you know who you are, to help us organize that. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. And we'll be in touch going forward. We all are in this together. And so we'll all be working on this going forward. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank everyone for attending today. And we hope to bring you again something like this soon. If you want to make any kind of donations to the cause, LindaleLegalFund.org. I dropped that in the chat and Linda didn't see it. I'm sure that they would appreciate your donation today, because he's done a lot to save elections in the United States. Linda, you were amazing. Thanks to you for all of the hours of sacrifice that you've done to put into this. I mean, it's going to be a huge key to turning election integrity around across America.
Great. Thank you so much, Valerie. Oh, I thought Byron was ready to jump in. Thank you, everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.